Hello, my name is Diane Lorz Benitez, and this, without a second thought, is a memoir of life in Spain during the regime of the dictator Generalissimo Franco. The title, Without a Second Thought, sets up the story of a 24-year-old American girl who accompanies a worldly Spanish engineer 10 years her senior when he returns to his home in Madrid, in a country whose culture is unknown to her and whose language is only vaguely familiar thanks to a high school Spanish class. She boards a ship, believing that everything she wants is found in the way Alberto pronounces her name. Not a dry Diane, but Diana, each vowel heavy with promise. This, then, is a memoir of the 12 years I lived in Spain. I've pulled a section that I hope will pique your interest. So, Alberto and I drove to a resort on the Costa Brava. Alberto revealed the landscape to me like turning the pages of a book. Where I saw only mounds and valleys, Alberto saw Moorish remains and ancient riverbeds. In the time before Alberto and his band of engineers had improved the roads, a journey held adventure at every turn. Once, on a deserted mountain, Alberto stopped at the side of the road where a rudimentary hand-painted sign read agua potable, drinking water. I saw nothing to indicate a rest stop, but Alberto got out of the car and pointed to a clear stream of water running from a pipe stuck in the side of the mountain. A tin cup hung from a chain attached to the pipe. "Is this really safe?" I asked. "Of course," Alberto said. He splashed his face, filled the cup, drank, and then handed the cup to me. "Go ahead," he said. I don't know what bothered me more, drinking unfiltered, chemical-free water direct from the source, or using a cup that had been touched by Lord knows how many lips. If Alberto had not been watching, I don't know if I would have brought the cup to my mouth. But he was, and I did, and all I remember was how cold it was. Now, on this Costa Brava trip, we had traveled for several miles looking for a place to have lunch. We passed villages, but in the 1960s, village population was shrinking. Young people looked for work in the cities, and rural life was often reduced to a community of 6 or 7 families, none with a restaurant. I was scanning the map on my lap for a town that might be more than a cluster of stone dwellings when I felt the car turn onto a bumpy road. "What are you doing?" I said, as Alberto shifted the Seat from 4th to 3rd. The only signs of human life on the hilltop were a small house and a rudimentary barn. Alberto didn't answer for a moment and stopped near the open barn door. "I'm starving," he said, and got out of the car. In the doorway, a wrinkle-faced man who could not have stood more than 5 feet tall watched motionless. Immediately, I thought of the Spanish Civil War and what Alberto had told me. "The children born and reared during the 1930s never thrived," he said. "We were all malnourished." I had seen that for myself. Alberto had reached 5'7", but his cousins, born a decade later, when food was more abundant, were all over 6 feet tall. Still, Alberto seemed to tower over the rustic figure in the doorway, who wore a black beret, the type the Spaniards call a boina, a white collarless shirt, and shapeless brown corduroy pants that looked to be a one-size-fits-all variety. What I could see of his withered face and exposed forearms appeared to be brown corduroy too. The men exchanged a few words, then disappeared into the barn. When they emerged a few minutes later, Alberto motioned for me to join them. "We can eat here," he said. "Here?" I looked around. At that moment, Alberto chose to speak English. "Yes, the old guy says he has food." The farmer looked at me quizzically, then beckoned me to the barn. To one side, just past the door, stood a small wooden cask. He lifted the lid with a tentative smile, alternately tapping his chest and pointing to the barrel. Inside lay the glistening river trout he had pickled himself, and for a moment a whip of pungent brine replaced the aroma of grain and livestock. Muy bonito, I said. The farmer's smile broadened. Before I could say more than very pretty, he had pulled a pair of sawhorses from a corner, set a plank upon them, and then dashed up the rise to his house. He returned with a chair dangling from the crook of each elbow, and his wife a few steps behind. I knew the woman was his wife because of her dress, long-sleeved, calf-length, and black, the traditional mark of a married woman in rural society. One expects cultural differences between countries, but even in Spain itself, the contrast between city and village was extreme. As I stood before the farmer's wife, in my pale beige hip huggers with the flared cuffs and a sleeveless top that opened in front to what I hoped was a tantalizing inch above my bra, the difference must have seemed extraterrestrial to her. The woman carried plates and cutlery and a bottle of wine and half a round of coarse country bread. She set the makeshift table with a white cloth while her husband talked trout. When she finished, she turned to us. Huevos fritos? Perfecto. Alberto and I answered in enthusiastic unison, because though it sounds quite simple, an egg fried Spanish style is a wonderful thing. There is magic in the olive oil. Slipped into a skillet of near boiling oil, the egg white shudders and bubbles, and as the cook gently bastes the egg center, the white forms a lacy halo around the yolk. Sometimes the white gets crisp on the edge. I always ate that part first, and then, after piercing the yolk with a crust, soaked it up with a chunk of bread. Salty, hot, golden, and delicious. How did you manage that? I said to Alberto an hour later as we carried on to the coast. We'd had first course, second course, bread and wine, plus a slice of pale green football-shaped fruit called melon. Never mind, the wine could have doubled as paint thinner. Well, when I asked El Viejo if he knew of a restaurant somewhere, he said he'd never heard of one, but if we were really hungry, he could probably feed us. You saw, he rather insisted. Talk about Spanish hospitality, and he didn't want to take any money. I'm glad you found a way. We probably made his day. He'll be talking about this for ages. I'm sure he never had an Americana eating trout in his barn before. I laughed. That was a first for me too.